Good afternoon. Viva la fiesta. There we go. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So obviously calling to order the August 1st, 2017 council meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Hotchkiss?
Here.
Councilmember White? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Dominguez?
Here.
Mayor Schneider?
Here.
Councilmember Rose? Here. Councilmember Hart?
Here.
And Councilmember Murillo? Here.
Great. And item 1, please.
Item 1, Certificate of Appreciation honoring Linda Vega Dance Studio's 30th anniversary.
What a crowd. In 1987, the world-renowned dancer, choreographer, and teacher Linda Vega opened the Linda Vega Dance Studio in Santa Barbara. And for the past 3 decades, the Linda Vega Dance Studio has demonstrated a commitment to preserving and sharing flamenco and traditional Spanish dance through its award-winning dance classes, programs, and public presentations. Oh, thank you, Linda. Thank you. Since its inception, the Linda Vega Dance Studio has been highly involved with Old Spanish Days, producing 33 of Fiesta Spirits and Junior Spirits. 35. 35. And earning Linda Vega herself the Deckers Tiffany Award for her notable contribution to this historic Santa Barbara event. The Linda Vega Dance Studio emphasizes community service as an integral part of its program, hosting performances at retirement homes, convalescent homes, charity functions, schools, and city fairs and festivals. The Linda Vega Dance Studio continues to enrich Santa Barbara's cultural landscape through its award-winning dance instruction, inspired performances, and commitment to the community. So therefore, I, Helene Schneider, by virtue of the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, California, do hereby congratulate Linda Vega and the students, staff, and instructors of the Linda Vega Dance Studio on this milestone 30th anniversary. Viva la fiesta and viva Linda Vega.
Thank you, everybody. I just want to say, those who know me well know that I am not a woman of few words, but I'm going to be a woman of few words right now.
You need to address us up front.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Forgive me. Thank you. I just thank you so much from deep in my heart, because it has been so much pleasure to do this. You know, it really, really fills my heart to give everything I have inside to my students. And so this was never a chore. It was always a blessing. So thank you so much for all of you. Thank you.
Item 2, Employee Recognition Service Award Pins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Each month we like to recognize employees who've achieved certain milestones with the city. I'd like to read some names into the record for those who've achieved those milestones. And we have one employee who's here in person today to receive her pin in person. With 5 years of service to the city, Ramiro Arroyo, Parks Supervisor, Parks and Recreation Department. Corey Olison, Water Distribution Operator, Technician 2, Public Works Department. With 10 years of service, Max Kashanian, Project Engineer 1, Public Works Department, and Jeanette Prusinski, Executive Assistant with the Waterfront Department. With 15 years of service to the city, Andrew Rhodes, Water Treatment Superintendent, Public Works Department. With 20 years of service, Randy Ward, Senior Public Works Inspector, Public Works Department. And 35 years of service, Michelle DeCant, Public Works Business Manager, Public Works Department. And here in person, with 30 years of service to the city, is Andrea Bifano, Senior Rental Housing Mediation Specialist, Community Development Department.
Andrea Bifano began her employment with the City of Santa Barbara in the Rental Housing Mediation Program in 1987. Since then, the program has expanded to include contracted services to the City of Goleta, City of Carpinteria, and until recently the City of Santa Barbara County. The program's success reflects her skill, knowledge, professionalism, dedication, and enthusiasm. She's earned the trust and respect of both tenants and landlords. Andrea is an expert in California landlord-tenants' rights and responsibilities and mediation. She developed a comprehensive mediator training program for staff and City Council-appointed volunteer mediators, which has resulted in an overall program success rate of 100% for face-to-face mediations. In addition, she has provided training to students at University of California at Santa Barbara and Santa Barbara City College. She's represented the program in local media. She was recently a presenter of the Coastal Housing Coalition Conference and the Renters' Rights Forum. Andrea has played a critical and important role in many different difficult landlord-tenant situations, including mediating a mass eviction with 114 tenants and 90 children. She has provided assistance to thousands of individuals, some of whom have described her as invaluable, professional, knowledgeable, kind-hearted, and a gift to the community. She's received multiple awards and commendations for over 30 years of service from organizations ranging from the United States Congress and the Assembly of the State of California to the South Coast Beacon Unsung Hero, Rotary International, and of course the City of Santa Barbara. So Andrea Bifano, it's my pleasure to honor you today for your 30 years of service to the City of Santa Barbara. On behalf of the Council, congratulations on this admirable achievement.
I would like to thank Honorable Mayor Helene Schneider, distinguished council members, and Paul Casey, City Administrator, for this service award, their leadership, and continued support of the Rental Housing Mediation Program. To quote Gandhi, the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. In 1987, I began my employment with the City of Santa Barbara. The concept of mediation and alternative dispute resolution and its legislation was in the early stages of development. We grew together, and I found my true vocation in the service of others through mediation. I am thankful for the city having entrusted me with this important work and for providing me with opportunities for professional growth and self-development. I have a passion for helping people, and my profession in mediation has allowed me to do this work that I love. It provides a fair, just, and neutral forum for resolving disputes whereby all parties maintain their dignity. Mediation brings people together to resolve complex disputes amicably, which is a valuable asset. The work we do directly benefits landlords, tenants, and the community, which results in a triple win. The ripple effect of mediation is the prevention of homelessness, averts costly legal fees, results in landlords maintaining stable rental housing property, and saves city resources. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to our 15 City Council-appointed mediators for their dedication and devotion to the mediation process. I have the utmost respect for them as their focus is on giving back to our community. I know a number of them are here today. Can you please stand up or come forward? There they are. I see past Chair Lisa Beck, past Chair Justin Dolan, current Chair Lisa Beck, Bruce Wallenberg, officer, Robert Burke, and I'm sure there's more back there. And Chris Casebeer is here as well. Thank you, Chris, for making it. Again, all of our mediators are very fine individuals, and I'm very proud to have them on our board. And as mentioned in the award, the board has a 100% success rate in settling face-to-face mediation, so that says a lot. I'd like to thank my mother, Eileen Bufano Baroni, my role model who taught me a strong work ethic and that one person can make a difference. Also to my husband, Jesse Martinez, attorney, for encouraging me from the beginning to apply for this job. I always have to give him credit. To the rest of my family, friends, and colleagues, my appreciation for their valuable support and teamwork throughout the years. Success is felt most when there is a network of loving, caring people standing beside you. Many are here. I feel both honored and successful today. A friend asked me to sum up my 30 years of mediation services. What came to mind was admiration for the strength, courage, and heartfelt desire of our residents to help each other work through their differences. And a single wish: may we live that each tomorrow find all of us within our community better than today. It is an honor and a privilege to work with the City of Santa Barbara. I consider it my home. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have Lisa Beck who'd like to speak on this item, and then we'll get to public comment. So Lisa, are you here? I think you're in the back. Come on up.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Beck, and I'm the current chair of the Rental Housing Mediation Board. So I just wanted to say a few quick words on behalf of our board members about Andrea. Andrea is one of the kindest, most supportive, and hardest working people that I have ever known. I've known her for nearly a decade now, and in that time, I've seen her work tirelessly to resolve numerous housing conflicts, many of which could have resulted in people losing their tenancies, if not for Andrea's facilitation, and educate countless people about their rights and responsibilities as tenants and landlords. Further, she advocates passionately for Santa Barbara's underserved populations. Andrea's enthusiasm for her work is infectious, and her belief in the difference that you can make in other people's lives makes others believe it as well. It is her leadership, guidance, continuity, and sheer force of will that have made the rental housing mediation program successful, and it allows it to assist and empower so many individuals and families. I'm delighted to be present here today to see her receive her 30-year pin along with a number of other members of the board, and I am so honored to call her my mentor and my friend. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda? No. Okay, so public comment. I see a La Presidente in the room. I don't have a speaker slip, but I have a feeling you might want to say something. So now would be a good time. Please come on up. Rhonda Henderson. Welcome.
Your Honorable Mayor, City Council, Mr. Casey, we have a little party kicking off tomorrow called Fiesta. And this will be our 93rd anniversary of the city and Old Spanish Days collaborating to put on this amazing city festival. I'm here to say thank you. I'm here to acknowledge this long-term collaboration. I personally have gotten to work with so many of you and, of course, your incredible staff. I also have something that I wanted to present to you today, as well as these lovely flower girls behind me, I believe, have something they wanted to present to each of you if they can come
Yes.
up.
Fritz was asking if he can come to the side of the bar, and the only people actually we do allow are the flower girls once a year, and that's it.
They're
so
safe.
That's why Fritz is over there. But if the flower girls like to come forward, and welcome to City Hall. There we go.
And Helene, if you could come down so I can present something to you.
Sure.
So as tradition, we at Old Spanish Days are very pleased to present to the city the official poster for this year's Fiesta. Unity through community, I think a day like this speaks to that. Without all of us coming together from the Flower Girls, it was such an honor to be here today when you honored Linda Vega. Her 30 years collaboration with Old Spanish Days has brought us so much talent and beauty to the stage. So it's my honor, my daughter will do the honor of presenting you with the official poster. I look forward to seeing you all at the different amazing events, starting with opening up in your front yard tomorrow morning, De La Guerra at 11 a.m. I want to acknowledge and thank the city for allowing us to throw so many events on your properties, from De La Guerra to Del Norte to the Rose Garden across from the Mission, and closing down that little street called State Street to put a few horses up your beautiful streets. So on behalf of all of us at Old Spanish Days, thank you very much for all that you do to make our city continue to be such a blessed place to live. Viva la fiesta.
And I see our Spirit and Junior Spirit are here as well, so welcome to City Hall, and we look forward to you serving as ambassadors for us this whole week, so thank you. Okay. Here. All right, we do have some other public comment, and I have 2 minutes here at the podium. We'll start with Sally Hamilton and Takako Wakita, to be followed by Ray Estrada.
Madam Mayor and members of the City Council, Mr. Casey, it's a pleasure to come. I'm with Takako Wakita today. We are from the Santa Barbara Toba Sister City Organization, and we would like you to meet the 24th year of students that we have coming. We have 4 students from Santa Barbara, 4 from Toba, and the students come here during Fiesta. Tonight they will go watch the rehearsal up at the Mission, and then they will go next week. Our 4 students will go to Japan next week during their festival of Obon. So it's a wonderful exchange of festivals and families. The chaperone, Mr. Pacheco, is here from Santa Barbara. Yo Nishimura is the chaperone from Toba. He's an elementary school teacher. And I'd like to ask each of the students to introduce themselves to you. Go right up here.
My name is Kotaro Uemura. I am 13 years old. I like hamburger.
Thank you.
My name is Shuto Seko. I am 14 years old. I like fish.
Hi, my name is Yuya Sahara. I'm 14 years old. I like Santa Barbara Ocean View. Thank you. Hello, my name is Toko. I'm 13 years old. I like Santa Barbara people.
Very good. James.
My name is James Patton Rubin. I'm 14 years old, and I've really enjoyed learning more about Japanese culture.
Hi, I'm Rithi. I am 13 years old, and I've really liked spending time with the Japanese students.
Stay here with you. Caden?
My name is Caden. I'm 14 years old, and I've really enjoyed learning the Japanese language.
My name is Mia York. I am 13, and I am enjoying learning about Japanese culture and language.
Rithi wanted to say a little bit more.
Okay. We are all so honored to be student ambassadors representing Santa Barbara, and we are all having such a great time here. We've done many activities such as going up to a water park in Ojai and bowling. And I remember before the Japanese students came, I did a bit of research on what they would be like, and it said that they were usually shy, but I have found it's the complete opposite. They are all so friendly and nice and happy and willing to do everything. And we are also all so excited to go back to Toba and represent Santa Barbara there too. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And welcome to Santa Barbara.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I have Ray Estrada, and then I have Ray Estrada giving minutes to somebody else, so to Natalia. So either Natalia or Ray. And is Natalia here? I'm sorry, where is she? You're here? Oh, okay. So you're giving your 2 minutes to Ray, or are you speaking?
I don't need it.
Ray, okay, well, come on up. You have 2 minutes, Ray, then, and then Scott Ruskamp is after you.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, honorable council members. Normally I'd be taking notes on something like this, but I feel compelled to take a side on it because it's too close to home, my home. I don't own the home, but I live there on Little Ruth Avenue, which is a tiny little neighborhood, 1 block long, maybe 18 homes. The issue is the property owner next door at 414 Ruth Avenue wants to build a vacation rental. I know you've all been dealing with this issue. I don't want to take up a lot of your time on it, but it does seem very inconsistent with the single-family residential zoning in that area. There's no parking. I don't even own a car, so I don't have to park, but there's no parking at night. And if you put a vacation, if a vacation rental is allowed to be there, it'll change the whole complexion of the neighborhood. I see that there's a lot of construction going to be happening in the backyard. The building blocks are there. The yellow sign out front may say that it's going to be developed, but most people in the neighborhood don't even know it. So I would ask the council to arrange some type of public hearing so that this issue can be aired out, or maybe consolidate it with some other agenda items that you have on the future on this subject. So that's really about all I have to say, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Scott Ruskamp, and is Athena Tam here? Yes, okay, you're giving your 2 minutes to Mr. Ruskamp, okay. And then Jose Arturo Gallegos will be after you. So Mr. Ruskamp, you have up to 4 minutes.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Scott Ruskamp. I'm part of a group called Equity for SB. We're working with the SBPD to modernize the use of force policy. When I first saw SBPD's Chief Lunau address City Council last year on October 4th, I was excited for new leadership and new ideas that would keep SBPD as a department to be proud of in its local influence and also when held up against other PDs nationally. Chief Lunau's presentation to City Council last Tuesday justifies that excitement, as it's clear she continues to lead the PD to accomplish remarkable things like a reduction in violent and property crimes and reduction in officers being injured, as well as producing a culture of trust and respect in the department. I've also attended this year's Citizens Academy and performed a ride-along with an SBPD officer, and so I've seen firsthand and appreciate the department reaching out to the community. One of the things I was most excited about was when Chief Lunau talked about the use of force policy. In the October 4th City Council meeting, she said she would make sure we have the latest and greatest use of force options and policies, as well as de-escalation techniques. This really encouraged me, as many law enforcement officers have confirmed to me that the use of force policy is a very important, if not the most important, policy to an officer. Research groups like Campaign Zero have shown that better use of force policies correlate directly with less violence, including both police violence directed towards the community and community violence directed towards the police, meaning both the community and police are safer. Obama's 21st Century Policing Task Force, which last Tuesday Chief Lunau admirably said was the framework that the SBPD is operating under, this task force specifically recommends clear and comprehensive policies on the use of force, including training on the importance of de-escalation. Equity for SB, gathering members from Showing Up for Racial Justice and Black Lives Matter SB, decided to support this effort by researching more about the national debate over use of force policies, meeting with and communicating this to the police department, and also reaching out to the community in a safe environment to receive feedback. We sent our requests to the PD on June 6th. These requests included, among other things, de-escalation and a use of force matrix, both of which Chief Lunau has shown desire to include. We've offered to meet with the PD again to push this effort along, but so far haven't been taken up on the offer. As we've said in the past, we look forward to continue working collaboratively with the PD on use of force policy and other matters. Chief Lunau mentioned last Tuesday at the City Council meeting that the PD is working on updating the policies like use of force, but that there is currently no person assigned to the task. While we understand that there are staffing, budget, scheduling, and other concerns, we worry that without having a person assigned to at least update the crucial use of force policy, it will be difficult to make some of the changes that are desired by Chief Lunau, key national organizations, and the Santa Barbara community. I come here today to encourage that Chief Lunau continues to get the support she needs to enact these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Jose Arturo Gallegos. And then, Mr. Rushan, you mentioned you're asking about a denial of the appeals. That's for the appeal, or is this public comment? Is Mr. Rushan here? Oh. Okay, because that's what your note says. So, all right. All right, so then you're next. Mr. Gallegos.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This past Saturday morning, the MCA, Milpas Community Association, in which I am a board member, we put up the canvas artwork that the children had done, new canvases, or the canvases. And the one thing I noticed, and what we were told, is there was a couple of new trash cans that the city had put up there. Yeah, they're brand new. And so do not put the canvas artwork done by the children of the East Side on those cans. Great. And we had a great time doing this project. And I was thinking, why not put the canvas artwork done by the children of the East Side on the new ones? First of all, it will prevent them from getting weather beaten and that sort of thing. I'd like to see this tradition going for the years to come on Milpas Street, the artwork done by the children in the East Side. And that would be a wonderful thing. That way, when they get older, hey, I was part of this. Their children, their grandchildren, future generations, to keep this tradition going. And I would like to see that. Who knows if I'd be around another 20, 30 years, I don't know. But I would like future generations to continue this, to put, the canvas artwork on the trash cans on Milpas Street.
Thank you.
Whether it be old or new.
Mr. Hotchkiss has a question for you.
Quick question, Jose.
Yes, sir.
Why did they not want to use put the artwork on the two new cans?
I don't know the exact reasons. I think this is something the city or Planning Commission, I don't know if it's the Architectural Review Board. I have no idea.
When you find out, let me know, would you?
I will do that, but because there's one there's one at Buen Gusto, brand new can there, and one I think it's Los Agaves on Milpas and Coda. So we did not put those there, but the old beat up ones we did.
And do you have the artwork to put up if you could?
Yeah, we could. We could still continue because we recently just got the new ones in, and we went as from over there on the just up from Taco Bell up there down to the Wells Fargo Bank. And yeah, thank you.
So let me know because I think it'd be good to have there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dominguez also has a question.
Mr. Casey, which staff member should Mr. Gallegos speak with? Who's most?
Environmental Services with Renee Early.
Okay, is that on the first floor?
They're located in the Granada Garage. We can get him the
Granada
contact.
Garage.
If he doesn't have it, we can get that contact information.
Thank you.
All right. Joe Rushan will be followed by Kyle Clark.
Thank you. Of all the places fate or accident or random events led us, we find ourselves in this place, one of the most desirable environments, places to live in the world. We get up in the morning, look out our window, and we appreciate how much this place means to us, how much it has given us. People in this community have given a lot. We have, as you know, many, many people that are givers. On the other hand, a lot of people come here and they look around and they see dollar signs. Why do I bring this up? Why do I mention this? The reason I mention this is because we're depending on you folks to sort them out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kyle Clark. Kyle Clark. And is Maureen Messon here? Maureen, are you speaking, or are you giving your 2 minutes to Kyle? Because both your names are on there. Is Maureen here? If she wants to speak or give you her 2 minutes, she needs to be in the room. So
Yeah, I thought somebody was giving me their 2 minutes.
all I see is Kyle Clark, Maureen Messon. I don't know what that means. So thank you very much. Okay, you have up to 4 minutes.
Okay.
And then Anna Marie Gott will be after you. Go ahead.
All right.
But stay in the room, Miss Masson, please. So, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm here regarding the issue of short-term vacation rentals under 1,000 square feet. Get a little closer. All righty. Yeah, I'm here about the issue of short-term vacation rentals below 1,000 square feet. And I'm the manager of a property that's next door to one of these Airbnbs. And I know that they have a permit for one of their units. But I know for a fact that 2 of the units are being operated as an Airbnb, and I think that there's actually 3 of them, but I know for a fact that 2 of them are being operated as Airbnb units because we found the ads for them, on the website for Airbnb and all of that, and it's created a massive nuisance to all the tenants that are living on our property. Like I said, I'm the property manager, so I get to hear all the complaints from all the tenants, as well as the concerns of the owners, and it's really become a huge imposition and a huge nuisance that's reduced the quality of life for everybody that's on the property. Actually, 2 tenants that were long-term that were living in the front building, which is most immediately impacted by all the noise that's created by this short-term rental, have actually left in the last year. And I know that one of them, the noise issues probably contributed to their choice to leave the property. This is my first time at a city council meeting, and so I don't know exactly how long this issue has had your attention, but it's become a big problem for all the residents in my neighborhood, not just the people on my property. I've talked to other people in the neighborhood who have issues with it as well. The noise, the constant turnover of new people that don't live in the neighborhood. There's no way to establish community. There's no way to establish relationships between neighbors when you're dealing with people who are coming as tourists for just 3 days or 4 days at a time. And I know they're paying a lot of money to stay there on a daily basis or a weekly basis, so I can sympathize to some degree that they want to have fun, they want to party, but there's just an inherent lack of consideration when you have tourists that are turning a residential area into a hotel, that they're not going to, care about their relationship. They're not going to care about the effect that their behavior has, the noise that they make to the people that are living next door. And there's a constant stream of noise that's produced by this. And, I know this has come up in city council meetings a lot more recently in recent months, maybe in the last year, but there doesn't seem to be any progress on this issue. And, they're operating illegally, and there's no enforcement. There's no consequence for them operating illegally. I also discovered that they don't have a permit for the jacuzzi that they have that's literally about 15 feet from, or not even 15 feet, 10 feet from, one of the tenants who has a newborn baby that was just born in June, and they have a daughter that's 3 or 4, and so they have trouble getting enough sleep as it is. And now they're kept up every weekend, whether it's a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, with loud noise.
Thank you.
And
That's a good question.
we've made 9 calls
Okay.
to the police
Mr.
over the last
Dominguez
year.
has a question for you.
Yes.
You mentioned you're the manager of a property. What type of property? Can you give me a brief description?
It's a rental property with long-term tenants. The last tenants that left had lived there for 28 years. So
How many units are there?
There's 4 units on it, and like I said, there's 3 units on the Airbnb that's next door.
What's the address of that location?
And I should have given that to you. It's 102 and 106 West Islay Street.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I really hope you guys do something about this. It's a big problem
Thank you.
that many people in the
Thank
city
you.
are
Your time's up.
concerned about.
Thank you. Okay, Anna Gott, and then Christine Newhauser. Are you giving your? Okay, all right. So when you want, you guys have been here enough times to know. Please be clear about what it is that you're doing. So it's kind of so you
I
are
have to
waiving your
apo-
time to Anna.
I
Got it.
have to
Go right ahead.
apologize. I filled
Yes,
it
sir.
out. I have to apologize. I filled it out, and I was a little bit stressed trying to get in here, especially when I saw the kids from Fiesta. So, Kyle talked about the short-term vacation rental that is actually permitted at 1805 Chapala. That unit was under 1,000 square feet. As you already know from the July 18th meeting that we had regarding 101 West Anna Pamu, the condominium and hotel conversion ordinance exempts single conversions from the ordinance itself. And units under 1,000 square feet do not require a development plan approval finding. There are no requirements. They might have a few requirements that they have to go through and check off on a piece of paper. They don't have a requirement that they cannot rent an illegal short-term vacation rental or maybe have the permit revoked. They don't have an absolute requirement that they have to provide parking. They do not have any requirements. It is ridiculous that we allow an unlimited number of conversions to occur annually under this exemption. This is the absolute opposite of sound community planning. It is making people have sleepless nights. They can't find parking. They can't find a place to live. And these are your residents, the people that live here and work here. But instead, the people that are actually staying in many of these apartment buildings and duplexes and single-family homes, they don't live here. They're tourists for a few days. They may spend a few dollars down the street, downtown, but they don't support your auto mechanic. They don't support the dentist. They don't support the doctors. They don't work in your police department or your fire department. They don't deserve to be staying in our residential homes for 2 or 3 days and then to leave, and the person that owns that property to get away scot-free, which is exactly what's happening in 1805 Chapala. You have a legal and an illegal short-term vacation rental. But there's no requirement that we're going to take away that permit. There's no requirement that we will do anything other than send out an enforcement officer who won't be able to find the listing, who won't be able to identify that there's a problem, because the listings go up and they go down. They go 30 days and then they get changed to 1-day rental because the enforcement does not work. More importantly, though, we have an exemption that is not working for the city. We have people from out of the area, and I will say this again, people that are investing in Santa Barbara simply to get as much money as they can for the rents. And that way they do that is to rent single-family homes, half of an apartment building, or maybe even an entire apartment building on Airbnb. I would like you to agendize this issue. It is a substantial issue. Everyone up here for election should be making this an issue during the election this year because it affects planning. It affects our residents, it affects their take-home pay, and it affects the amount of money that they have in disposable income to actually buy things here in Santa Barbara and to stay in Santa Barbara versus a tourist who's going to be here for a few days and then will leave. Please agendize this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. We're on to the consent calendar, and there's some items to read. Mr. Hotchkiss, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have for the city attorney. Could we get a report, not now necessarily, but next session about how we're doing on enforcement on the short-term rentals?
Second.
Well, hold on. Let's hear what. I don't think
Madam
that was
Mayor,
a
Council
motion.
Members Hotchkiss and Dominguez.
Sure. We, in conjunction with CD, have given that report outside of a meeting before. I can tell you our office has north of 200 open enforcement cases right now. I can't speak for how many are in CD.
Okay. Well, whatever detail we could get would be great. I don't want to burden you with unnecessarily, but people are interested. Thank you.
We are, no, you had your time. Thank you. Mr. Dominguez?
I think it is time for us to ask staff to revisit that issue, why it seems like kind of an arbitrary number, this 1,000 square feet. So at some point, I would like to see staff address that, as well as why we're allowing them in the areas of the city that are the most congested with the worst traffic and the worst parking, and in the areas where there's multifamily homes. So, for example, Kathy Murillo's district, the district where Councilmember Hart lives, and my district are predominantly multifamily homes and rentals. And those are really the areas that are the largest districts having the zone where STRs are allowed. So that's something that I want to get to the heart of. Why are some parts of the city excluded and we can't have short-term rentals there, and then other parts we can? And it seems like the parts where it's allowed, and if people are having issues with nuisance and parking problems, it's the part of the city that's least politically engaged which are stuck with those problems. So that's something I'd like to see staff address. How do we create a little more equity?
Okay, we're on to the consent calendar. Thank you.
Item 3, introduction of ordinance for outdoor smoke-free public areas. Recommendation that council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending Chapter 9.20 of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code in its entirety, prohibiting smoking in public places. Item 4, adoption of ordinance for renewal of agreement to use recycled water at Showground Self-Storage at 3650 Calle Real. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving the agreement to use recycled water between the City of Santa Barbara and Showground Self-Storage for purchase, use, and delivery of the city's recycled water. Item 5, adoption of ordinance for authorization to execute amendments to the installment sales agreement for the Charles E. Meyer Desalinization Plant. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the city administrator to approve and execute Amendment Number 1 and Amendment Number 2 to the installment sale agreement for the Desalination Plant Reactivation Project, Drinking Water State Revolving Fund Project Number 4210010-005C, Agreement Number D15-02006, and Item 6, Records Destruction for Community Development Department. Recommendation that council adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara relating to the destruction of records held by the Community Development Department in the Administration, Housing and Human Services, and Building and Safety Divisions. That's it.
Thank you. Without further objection, we'll waive further reading. Anyone need to take an item off, or is there a motion for the consent calendar? Okay. Moved by Hotchkiss, second by Rouse. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Normally we have on the agenda a report from we had an ordinance committee meeting today, right? Okay. So, Mr. Rouse, if you want to give a report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The ordinance committee met today to review the floodplain management ordinance update as proposed by staff. It was moved to by the ordinance committee 2-1 to move forward to council with the minimum FEMA requirements, but also to have a further look at some of the city staff suggestions as well in detail.
Great. Okay. Item 14.
Item 14, appeal of the Architectural Board of Review's denial of a short-term rental hotel at 812 Jennings Avenue.
Okay, this is an appeal. Just to go over our process, we'll have a staff presentation, and if someone is here from the Architectural Board of Review, thank you for being here. You'll have a chance after to give your presentation at that point, or if we have any questions. Then the appellant is also the applicant, so you have up to 20 minutes to give your presentation. We'll have questions from council. It'll go to public comment, and then if the appellant has any time left from the 20 minutes they'd like to use at that point, they could. And then it comes back to council and it stays up here unless we have a question for anyone else. So before we get started, just want to see if anyone had any ex parte communications about this item. Okay. Seeing none, then we will move to Ms. Brooke and your staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Council. As you mentioned, this is an appeal of the Architectural Board of Review's decision for a project proposed at 812 Jennings Avenue. The proposal involves converting an existing home into a short-term rental or hotel use. Also, as part of that conversion, includes converting the garage to an accessory use for the hotel so that the garage would no longer be used for parking vehicles. So as a result of that, the project includes adding 2 uncovered parking spaces in the driveway, a new fence, some landscaping, and widening the driveway apron. To orient you to the project site, this is Jennings Avenue. It's 1 block long. And here's the site right here. And here's the street view of the house. The 2 uncovered parking spaces would be located roughly where this vehicle is parked, right here. And then in terms of zoning, the site is in the M1 zone. That's light manufacturing. That's everything that's noted here in the blue on this zoning map. Here's the site. The next zoning district over is C2 along the Milpas corridor, which is general commercial. I should note that residential use is non-conforming in the M1 zone. New residential development cannot be built in the M1 zone, so all the existing residential uses in this zone are considered legal non-conforming. The required discretionary application that was before the ABR was a development plan. That is because the project includes a conversion of more than 1,000 square feet of floor area from residential to non-residential use. There are also some exterior changes with the proposal that I described, and so the ABR was also looking at those changes as well. The application was denied by the ABR on April 24th of this year. The appellant, John Tyne, representing the property owner, raises 2 primary issues in his letter of appeal to the City Council. One is he questions the ABR's purview of development plans, and he also asserts that ABR's denial was a de facto prohibition on short-term rental conversions. And I'll go through those points in a little bit more detail. So as you're aware, the ABR did have purview of the development plan application in this case. Development plans are required for any proposal that involves converting residential floor area or either the construction of new non-residential floor area or the conversion of existing residential floor area to non-residential use. That's in the city's non-residential growth management program in the municipal code. Any project that is considered a non-residential construction project is subject to review and approval of a development plan. We have differing levels of review at different bodies depending on the size of the project that is the subject of the development plan. So in this case, the item here in bold is showing you that for development plans that are between 1,001 and 3,000 square feet, they are reviewed and decided by any one of the design boards, ABR, HLC, or the staff hearing officer if there's another element of the project that would otherwise go to the staff hearing officer for decision. So that's the case here at 812 Jennings. It was before the ABR because it falls within that square footage range. Larger proposals that involve more non-residential square footage would go to the Planning Commission for approval if it involves more than 3,000 square feet. In instances when any project is going to a design review board that involves a development plan, staff prepares a written memo in advance in order to help aid the ABR and HLC in understanding the findings that are required, understanding the project proposal, why it's before them for action on a development plan, and then we suggest findings that they could make of the 4 findings that are required for a development plan. And that, we believe, can help assist the design review bodies take on this more of a land use role as they are required to do when they're acting on development plans. In this case, the memo that we provided to the ABR for 812 Jennings considered several factors in the proposal. One was the project site zoning. As I mentioned, it's in the M1 zone, and in our memo, we did say that the residential use is a legal nonconforming use in the M1 zone. Although it wasn't in our memo, it did come up during the ABR discussion. ABR asked staff if this unit was converted to a hotel, could it ever go back to a residential unit? And the answer is no, it could not. Under our existing and even under the new zoning ordinance, it would not be able to go back to residential use. We also considered the surrounding zoning and land uses, which I covered with you, mostly M1 and commercial zoning. The land uses are a mix. In this neighborhood, there's quite an even mix in the direct vicinity of residential and non-residential uses, and then, of course, the church just down the street as well. Staff also suggested in our findings to the ABR that we should consider the reduction in housing stock as a result of this proposal, but in balance with all the new housing permitted and approved, it was acceptable to consider the loss of one unit in this case. These are the 4 required findings for development plans. Finding B is the finding that the ABR was unable to make. They were not able to find that this project was consistent with the principles of sound community planning. And specifically, they stated that despite the fact that residential use is non-conforming here, housing is still a priority, and conversion to a commercial hotel use would be a loss for the neighborhood and the community at large. They did also note in the minutes and in their motion that they were concerned with the number of parking spaces as part of this proposal. I'll touch on that. We do require parking. Short-term rentals are subject to the hotel parking requirements, which is 1 space per bedroom. This is a 3-bedroom house, so it would typically require 3 parking spaces for a 3-bedroom hotel. But it already has a 1 space non-conforming parking credit as a residential use. It would have required 2 parking spaces. It only has 1. It gets to carry that non-conforming credit with it. So there are only 2 parking spaces required to be provided as part of this conversion, and they were proposing to provide that. It was 2 uncovered spaces parked tandem in the driveway. The second primary point of appeal made is the belief that this denial was a de facto prohibition on short-term rental conversions. And primarily in the letter, it stated because of the ABR basing their denial on the net loss of 1 unit. I'm sure the appellant will get into more detail on his belief of whether or not that is a de facto prohibition. There are many factors that discretionary decision-making bodies use when they're evaluating project proposals. And in this case, ABR used its independent judgment. They considered a lot of factors. One, location, the project scope, the land use and zoning, the surrounding uses. As well, we asked them to consider whether it's consistent with the general plan policies and their own board's guidelines. Throughout the hearing, the ABR hearing, there were many questions and answers from the board members to the applicant and to staff. And I do believe they used their independent judgment that day. And I would state that an action on one project does not mandate the same action on another project. Each one presents its own set of issues. And so it's not staff's belief that this is a de facto prohibition on short-term rental conversions. As is often brought up on these projects that involve development plans and the required finding for sound community planning, we look to the general plan for guidance and whether or not projects would be consistent with sound community planning. There are many general plan policies that could apply to projects. In this case, housing and land use element policies are the most applicable. We covered this a couple weeks ago in another hearing. As you know, the general plan calls for an adaptive management program where annually staff evaluates the effectiveness of the general plan to meet its policies and objectives. We'll continue to do that every year. We also monitor the net loss and gains of housing units, and we report those annually. We'll continue to do that. It is staff's belief that an annual evaluation of the general plan is a reasonable time frame, and that if there are any policy shifts or zoning changes as a result of that annual evaluation, that's the time to discuss those. Until then, we continue to apply our existing regulations that we have to enforce. So I conclude with a recommendation that Council consider the appeal issues raised to you today, consider the required development plan findings, and then after action, directing staff to return with a decision and findings reflecting the outcome of the appeal. And Amy Tripp is here from the ABR, if you would like her to speak to their decision.
Thank you. Would you like to add anything at this point? And thank you for your work on ABR.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Madam Mayor, council members, I think Renee pretty much covered our decision, and this did come to us as a consent item, and we felt the full board should weigh in instead of only two of us, so we did bring it to the full board so that we could get more of a consensus from the majority. And I think what it came down to was just the priority for housing, especially in this. We look at every project and consider it independently, and we felt that in this neighborhood, even though it's a mix, that it would be a loss to convert it to a commercial use.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, did you have a question? Go ahead, Mr. Dominguez.
I have a question. I'm sorry for Ms. Brooke. The slide 16, are you going to talk about slide 16?
Councilmember Dominguez, I wasn't intending to do it as part of my presentation, but I can speak to it if there's questions.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind going through it, explaining what the difference is between the RHNA number and the quantified objectives, and then what's been permitted to date.
Certainly. This is presented in the context of the finding regarding consistency with sound community planning and whether or not the loss of one unit as the result of this project would impact the city's ability to possibly meet our objectives for creation of new housing units. So the chart on here has a lot of numbers, and I'll walk through from left to right. So first of all, this is all within the context generally of the housing element planning period of 2015 to 2023. Just a side note, our RHNA allocation has a one-year difference. Our RHNA was allocated in 2014, but for the purposes of conversation, we can speak 8-year periods here. The city is assigned a regional housing needs allocation to the acronym here, RHNA, for over the period of our housing element, that we need to show that we have adequately zoned sites that might either be underutilized, underdeveloped, vacant, or have the capacity through zoning to produce the housing need that the city has been determined to have over this 8-year period, and it's divided by income categories. So that's this second column here, is through an assessment. Well, the RHNA number was given to the city, 4,100. We had to prove that over the course of 8 years, we had the land availability that were suitable for development or redevelopment with the proper zoning to potentially have an additional 4,100 units developed in the city. This next column, called quantified objectives, is a reflection of a more realistic number to expect actual production of new units during that period. So it's a recognition that the RHNA number assigned to a city doesn't mean that all those parcels could actually be developed in 8 years or achieve the same density that was assumed in the calculation when we report to the state, but that given other community policies, priorities, the stomach of the council and community to accept new residential development each year, and a reasonable objective would be just over 1,200 units to be built over this 8-year planning period. And then these columns here show how many units have been permitted to date in each of those income categories. And I'll note that for 2017, it's just half of the year. These are numbers reported as of June 30th. So we show here that in the first 2.5 years of our 8-year planning period, we have permitted 500 net new units. So we're well on our way to meeting the quantified objective of the housing element.
What's with the bagels in the moderate row? Why is no one developing housing in that segment of our economy?
That's a great question. I think there's many factors. We used to have more moderate housing units produced when, first, when we were seeing more condominium developments. We do have an inclusionary housing ordinance that is subject only to ownership units. We have seen very few condominium projects proposed since 2015. We have had a couple condominium projects who have opted to instead pay the in lieu fee, the inclusionary housing in lieu fee, rather than actually produce the units on the site. So we have collected some funds, although relatively small. Also, the Housing Authority, their projects would be captured in the very low and low line. So we currently are struggling as a community to produce moderate housing.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Hart?
Yes, could you tell me more about the parking that's being provided and the requirements? And we don't have a site plan in our packet, so I'd love to have a visual to understand what's being proposed.
Councilmember Hart, I apologize for that, and I can put one up on the screen over here.
Thank you.
Okay, so a partial site plan is up on the screen now. Jennings Avenue is at the bottom there. The house is in the middle, and then the back top corner there is showing the existing one-car garage proposed to be converted to an accessory structure. So currently, the zoning ordinance allows sites that are non-conforming to parking to carry that forward through a change of use. And so single-family homes require 2 covered parking spaces. This is a single-family home with 1 covered parking space, legally provided 1 space at the time. That's all that was required. So they have what we call a 1-space credit. It's a non-conforming credit. So when they convert this to a use that requires 3 spaces, they get to keep that credit so that they only have to provide the parking above the credit in the new use. So they have 1, the new use requires 3, they only have to provide 2. So the 2 that and they don't have to be covered if it's not a residential use. So the 2 uncovered parking spaces meet the requirement for a hotel use. And those are the 2 sort of dashed lines that you're seeing coming straight south of or straight below the garage here in the driveway.
So the 1 existing parking space in the garage is going to be converted, and it won't actually be a parking space. And so there'll be 2 parking spaces on site in tandem, and that meets the demand. But I don't recall tandem parking arrangements for a hotel before.
Correct, and that is unique, and that requires a design waiver to be issued by Public Works staff. And in this case, they were comfortable with this configuration for this use in this area. So they did intend to approve a design waiver here to allow tandem parking in the driveway.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Tyne, come on up. You have up to 20 minutes, and there's a clock right there at the podium.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, council members, Mr. Casey, Mr. Colon, Ms. Brooks, and I guess in keeping with today, we'll say Viva la Fiesta. So, it's important for us to note today that notwithstanding all of the passion and all of the argument that we're going to hear or that we've heard about short-term rentals, that is not what we are here to discuss today. Those arguments and those debates regarding short-term rentals are better reserved for a policy hearing rather than an appeal of a specific finding by the ABR, as is in this project. What is really before you today is whether or not conversion of this particular non-conforming residential unit in an M1 zone to an approved commercial use is permitted under the code. It does not matter what commercial use that Mr. Armel intends to put this property to, whether it's to have a barber shop or to have an ice cream shop or to lease his property for less than 30 days, the analysis should be the same, whether or not it is consistent with the code and it meets the guidelines in order to be converted from a residential property to a commercial use in the M1 zone. If we do look to the specific use that Mr. Armel intends to make of his property, and we treat that use differently than other commercial uses, for instance, if we say you can sell surfboards here, but you can't lease your property for less than 30 days. You can have a restaurant here, but you can't lease your property for less than 30 days. That could result in an unconstitutional discrimination between commercial uses. That's an unequal treatment under the law, and that would not survive scrutiny. The California Constitution, Section 7B, contains a provision that a citizen or class of citizens may not be granted privileges or immunities not granted on the same terms to all citizens. This is the Equal Protection Clause as it relates to privilege and immunities in the California Constitution. Recently in our city, property owners are being treated differently from one another based on whether or not their commercial conversion is for the purpose of short-term rental or some other purpose. Citizen property owners are experiencing different results based on whether their property is larger than 1,000 square feet and thus subject to ABR review, or smaller than 1,000 square feet and not subject to ABR review. All that we are asking you today is that you treat Mr. Armel consistently with the way that we treat other citizens who apply for a commercial conversion to an approved use in their zone when they meet all of the guidelines to achieve that conversion. My client, Mr. Armel, relied upon your direction regarding commercial conversions when he went forward and he sought this conversion. He relied on the city's code, and he relied on the staff's direction, and he did everything that he was required to do. He paid his fees, he hired an architect, he submitted his plans, he applied for the design waiver. He did all that he was supposed to do to get this commercial conversion. He communicated with the city before he bought this property to determine whether or not his property would be eligible to be converted. He communicated with the city after he bought the property, and he worked with them throughout the entire process. That is probably why staff was recommending that this project be approved at the April 24th ABR hearing. But because Mr. Armel's property is slightly over 1,000 square feet, it's 1,081 net square feet in the property, he was required to have a hearing at the ABR. It was interesting to hear today in public comment that there is something we haven't addressed in this specific case, and that is that single-family properties, when they are sought to be converted to a short-term rental use, are exempt from the conversion statute. So that's kind of just out there. We've sort of ignored that fact that this property isn't even subject to having to get the conversion. Anyway, in any event, this ABR hearing was conducted on April 24th, and the city staff was present. Ms. Brooks did an admirable job of correctly laying out everything that transpired up to that meeting. Notwithstanding the loud protests made by opponents of short-term rentals everywhere, staff made a recommendation to approve this project because it met all of the required guidelines. And staff specifically made a finding that this project is consistent with sound community planning. That's very important. The staff provided a very well-reasoned analysis of why they believe that this project can be considered consistent with sound community planning. At the April 24th hearing, the ABR, which of course is an unelected board, spent a significant amount of time talking about what they perceive to be the scourge of short-term rentals in our community. They ignored the recommendations of staff by making a finding that this specific project is not consistent with sound community planning. And they made that finding because, in their own words, in their mind, the removal of even one residential property from the city of Santa Barbara via commercial conversion to a commercial use is per se inconsistent with sound community planning due to the fact that we have a low vacancy rate in town. But they ignored the fact that this specific conversion would cure an already existing non-conforming use in the M1 zone, which is another general plan dictate. We are supposed to ameliorate non-conforming uses when given that opportunity. I'll mention a little bit more about that in a little bit. According to the ABR's decision on this specific project, based on their findings regarding sound community planning, there is not a single property in all of Santa Barbara that is subject to ABR review that can be converted from a residential use to a non-residential use. And while staff points out, and as I'm going to mention later, decisions affecting any particular property cannot be the basis for decisions affecting other properties, the language used by the ABR in this specific finding was clear that they were imposing a blanket prohibition on conversions of residential units to commercial uses. It was not limited to this specific case. If you read their decision, if you read the minutes of the ABR hearing, you'll see that they said that no conversion of residential properties can be allowed in Santa Barbara. To deny this project based on the ABR's desire to prevent the conversion of any residential properties to commercial use is essentially a change in the city's code being written by an unelected committee. It is not the applicant, but rather the ABR who introduced the concept of a blanket prohibition through their findings. If you uphold the ABR's decision today, it would be inconsistent with recently approved projects where conversions of residential properties to commercial uses in properly zoned areas were successful. As you'll note on my appeal, I attached one such project at 718 Castillo Street, where a single-family residence was approved by the ABR to be converted to a short-term rental on April 10, 2017, 2 weeks to the day before our hearing before the ABR in this case. Basically, the ABR approved a commercial conversion of a residential unit one day, and then within 2 weeks, according to their statements, it's their own statements regarding the conversion, at the April 24th, 17 hearing, they arbitrarily closed the door to all conversions of residential properties to commercial use that are subject to ABR review. This is the definition of unequal treatment under the law. The only question that is before you today is whether or not this specific project at 812 Jennings is or is not consistent with sound community planning. All other factors have been determined by staff and by the ABR to meet the guidelines for conversion of this specific property. To mandate approval of this project, meaning that this project should be approved. The only factor that ABR ruled on was sound community planning, as Ms. Brooks indicated. And city staff's recommendation to approve this project because it can be consistent with sound community planning was not accepted by the ABR at this hearing. I'm not here today to advocate for all short-term rentals in Santa Barbara. And your decision today is not going to be relevant to all short-term rentals in Santa Barbara. This is a site-specific appeal that affects only one property, and that is the property at 812 Jennings. I'm here to ask you to reverse the decision of the ABR in this specific case because it is inconsistent with the code and with the Equal Protection Clause that I mentioned earlier. To my knowledge, despite the ABR's ruling, there is no prohibition in this city that residential properties located within commercially zoned districts cannot be converted to commercial uses. But to endorse the ABR's finding today would be a finding that that is the case. that there is a prohibition against converting residential units within commercially zoned areas, irrespective of what that use is, whether it's an art gallery, a barber shop, an ice cream shop, a puppy adoption center, or a short-term rental. The question is, can a residential property that is non-conforming in an M1 zone, can that property be converted to a commercial use if it meets all of the guidelines required to do so, as this project does? It cannot be overstated that this is a unique case inasmuch as the current residential use in this zone is non-conforming. The use itself is not approved under our current code. If you approve this project, it will only affect this particular applicant. The staff considered this when they recommended approval and noted that our general plan does encourage the amelioration of non-conforming uses when possible. While the city staff did recognize, and Ms. Brooks reiterated today, that this conversion would result in the removal of one residential property from the city's housing stock, they also noted that such removals are anticipated and are counterbalanced by the introduction of new residential properties during the same period. So, if you are to grant our appeal today and approve this project, which meets every single guideline that is required to convert the specific property to a commercial use, then you are only saying that this specific citizen with a correctly zoned property can use the guidelines and can convert to commercial use. If, on the other hand, you deny this appeal, you are agreeing with the ABR's statement that there is a blanket prohibition against conversion of any residential properties in commercial zones if they are subject to ABR review. And again, it's found in their own language. It's not something that we are saying. That's what they said. Please do not follow the ABR's lead here and get caught up in the politics of short-term rentals, because this specific project is not about short-term rental. It is about converting this residential property that is a non-conforming property in an M1 zone to an approved commercial use. We meet all the required standards, and the only issue is whether or not you are prepared to rule that a citizen may not convert their residential property to a commercial use if subject to ABR review, even when that conversion removes a non-conforming use in the M1 zone. To rule that way is a violation of the California Constitution by treating property owners differently from one another based on whether or not their project triggers an ABR review. Turning our attention to the staff memo and the presentation that Ms. Brooks gave today on this particular appeal, it is important to note that the city staff has reiterated this project can be found consistent with sound community planning. The staff referred to its own memo of February 7th, 2017, and presented to you today, which is attached to their report, in which staff indicated several reasons that this project can be found consistent with sound community planning. And those factors included the fact that it is currently a non-conforming use in the M1 zone. The site's zoning designation allows for the proposed commercial use. The site is surrounded by industrially zoned properties occupied with a mix of commercial, industrial, and non-conforming residential uses. An incremental reduction in the city's housing stock, in this case, one residential property, is anticipated and balanced with additional residential units developed over the same period. Looking at these factors individually, there's no question that this property is currently non-conforming as a residential use in the M1 zone. That's taken for naught. The second factor, which is that the proposed use is currently authorized in the M1 zone, is also true today and was true at the time of this hearing. You'll hear some comment, or you've been provided some comments, that under the new zoning ordinance that was recently introduced, as of October 17, short-term rentals will not be allowed in the M1 zone. However, we have to deal with the law as is written today and as it was written on the date of this appeal. We cannot make decisions based on prospective legislative changes. To do so would be no different than having doctors and hospitals today refuse patients under the Affordable Care Act because they anticipate its repeal. We cannot do that. We cannot govern based on future legislative acts. It is legally unsupportable to render a decision based on future legislative changes. All this means that in the future, there will be no applications similar to this one for short-term rentals in an M1 zone. The last two factors that were cited by the staff are that the site is surrounded by industrial zoned properties, including commercial, industrial, and non-conforming residential uses. We'll hear today about how difficult it was to sell this property as a home because of that fact. Ms. Brooks indicated it's about half and half in the street, that it's half industrial use and half non-conforming use. And finally, the incremental loss of one residential property, when compared to the housing element, which was up on the board a little while ago, housing element policy H18 shows that the city is more than on target to meet and exceed the state requirements for the provision of residential properties. The loss of one residential property in this case does not have a cognizable impact on the city's housing stock. As a final note, the city staff correctly points out that a particular action on one project does not mandate action on others, even if seemingly similar applications are presented. This is noted to respond to my earlier comments that we are dealing with a de facto prohibition, but the maxim cuts both ways. The truth is that your actions today regarding 812 Jennings Avenue will have an effect only on 812 Jennings Avenue. This will not provide a precedent for other applicants, and it cannot be relied upon by other applicants as an example of approval of a short-term rental. The only issue before you today is whether Mr. Joe Armel, who has complied with all of the guidelines, he's paid his fees, he's hired professionals, he's coordinated with the city every single step of the way, right up until the ABR hearing, where he was surprised, as I think with staff and others, surprised when the ABR came out and said, we will no longer allow any conversion of any residential properties within a commercial zone if that application comes before us. We ask you that if you find that this project is consistent with sound community planning, as the staff indicated you're justified in doing, that would not be an endorsement of short-term rentals. All you are finding is that this specific project meets all of the guidelines required to convert a non-conforming residential use in an M1 zone to an approved commercial use within that zone. We ask you to make that decision because that is the truth. We ask you to reverse the ABR's denial of this application for this particular property. I thank you for your time, and I'll reserve my last few minutes.
You have 1 minute, 50 seconds, should you need it later. Go ahead, Mr. Dominguez. And Mr. Hart, I guess you don't have a question. Okay. Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you for your presentation. Regarding the unequal treatment and different things, it strikes me as an interesting argument, and I want to hear a little more. As humans, we treat different things differently, and you mentioned this being in the ABR zone or triggers the ABR hearing. So we have all sorts of rules within the city where we treat things differently. So what makes one treatment, we have zones, and every zone we treat people differently. So what makes this a case that's unconstitutional?
Well, it's interesting in light of your own personal comments earlier today from this dais, in which you said it does seem somewhat arbitrary that we've picked 1,000 square feet as a number, and we have these projects under 1,000 square feet that do not need to be reviewed and projects over 1,000 square feet that do need to be reviewed. In reality, if Mr. Armel had some foresight and chopped off 81 square feet or 81.1 square feet of his property, we would not be here.
That would have triggered a different review.
Yeah, probably. But that is the question, right? I hesitate to tackle that issue because it is beyond the confines of what we're here to do today. What we are here to do today is to determine whether or not this specific project, which meets all of the guidelines, should be approved under the existing code as it was written on April 24th, 2017, not as it's going to be in the future, but as it was on that day. And I'm trying to push away everybody's desire to make this about short-term rentals. It's not. It's about converting this specific property. And I'm, addressing that issue, that larger issue of whether or not it's inequitable treatment to subject this to ABR review when we don't subject others to ABR review. I think that is mandated by the findings that the ABR made in this case. They did not make property-specific findings. Had they done that, had they said, oh, your door is too wide, or, oh, this particular window is a bad design, or something of that nature, then they would have been absolutely on solid ground with their finding. But that's not what they did. What they did is they said, we think residential use is a more important use than any other use under the code. We're going to deviate from the general plan's instruction to ameliorate non-conforming uses in this specific case because we want to send a message that we don't want any conversion of residential properties within commercial zones. That is arbitrary. And that is arbitrary compared to what they did 2 weeks earlier on Castillo Street.
So, my second and last question was about Castillo because if they change their policy, I think we want to encourage boards and commissions to change their policies if they see that conditions have changed or the laws changed or facts have changed. We don't want to have a foolish consistency being a hobgoblin of small minds. We want them to be moving forward. So the other way to rectify that problem is to go back to Castillo and take away their permit, but I'm certainly not suggesting that. So how do you reconcile the fact we want boards and commissions to do the right thing without having them hamstrung by a precedent?
That would beg the question of what happened during that 2-week period. What happened between April 10th of 2017 and April 24th of 2017 that all of a sudden the ABR was felt that it was consistent with the city's policy to prohibit the conversion of residential properties in commercial zones to a commercial use? I don't think anything did happen during those 14 days.
There's an easy way to find out, so maybe I'll ask.
Okay.
Thank you.
Others Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to public comment. We have 2 minutes here at the podium. We will start with, Isa Bourbon, to be followed by Anaya Mussolini. Welcome.
Hi, Madam Mayor and City Council. Thank you so much for listening. My name is Isa Bourbon. I was born and raised in Santa Barbara, and I'm now choosing to create my life here. I choose Santa Barbara because of the unwavering integrity of the city and its people. We do the right thing and we support growth and opportunity. It's not easy to succeed here. It takes unwavering determination as well as the proper guidance. As a chef starting a catering company, there's countless rules I need to follow and steps I need to take. I look to the city to outline these rules and show me the proper steps to success. I want to do it right, so I'm able to give the community I have chosen as my home back what it deserves. Max has done this with extreme care and takes tremendous pride in doing things right. He does not cut corners, although it would be easier. He does not work under the radar where so many people do. He follows the rules because he believes in the systems that we as a city have put into place. Denying his project furthers distrust in the system and rewards malpractice. He's done and will continue to do good for the community in his entrepreneurial endeavors. It's up to you whether he and other innovative people continue to choose Santa Barbara as the community they wish to invest in. Max's project being approved solidifies the values of the law we have in place. Competition and innovation are not inhibitors of advancement. They are perpetuators of it. His short-term rental project is good for this community and all those that wish to visit it. He is propelling us forward and doing so by the law. What more could you ask for? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And you're going to have to help me with your pronunciation. You'll be followed by Lindsay Baker.
Hi, Anaya Mussolini. Thank you for your time. I currently have owned a cleaning business for almost 10 years now. I started it, and it put myself through college, through City College, and through UCSB. It's called Villa Organic Cleaning Services, and we use all organic products and glass bottles, so it's very environmentally conscious. And the project at Jennings pays my rent. It's great. It's a really great business. Pays my rent, pays my cell phone bill, my employees. I'm able to hire autistic people, and they make great cleaners because they're so meticulous at things. And so this project really just doesn't affect one rental, one person. It affects all my employees, all the people I'm able to employ. All my travels. I also have a travel business, and I stay at Airbnbs because I don't like hotels. I travel alone as a woman, and it's a very scary thing sometimes. And to stay at an Airbnb is really nice because it allows me not to be a tourist attraction. And it's also nice for families that can't afford the hotels. They're able to feel a little more safe. And a lot of the people that rent these places is families. And it's nice to let those people have access to Santa Barbara who otherwise couldn't afford to come here, have those Airbnbs not exist. And it's a really great way to welcome all kinds of people, all kinds of culture, which I know Santa Barbara is all about. I saw some of that today. And so it's really made a big difference. And it really distributes the wealth into the community. I mean, every single paycheck goes back into our place, and it pays our taxes. And so I just want to say I'm in support of the appeal, and thank you very much for your time on hearing all of us. Thank you.
Lindsay Baker will be followed by Jose Arturo Gallegos.
Madam Mayor, City Council members, Lindsay Baker speaking for the League of Women Voters. Because of our extremely low vacancy rate for residences, the League of Women Voters has steadily opposed any conversion of residences to short-term rentals. We agree with both the Historic Landmarks Commission and the Architecture Board of Review that this conversion would not be sound community planning. We want to oppose the appeal of the case before you now. Since there are now so many requests for such conversions, we suggest that you immediately approve a new ordinance that will forbid the conversion of any residences to short-term hotel rooms. We do have vacancies in our motels and hotels, so we do not want to undercut those established businesses. Thank you for allowing us to comment on this council consideration.
Jose Arturo Gallegos will be followed by Marco Farrell.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, first of all, I want to make this very clear. I'm not speaking on behalf of the MCA or as a board member of the MCA. I am speaking on behalf as an old East Side kid. Okay, so I grew up over there. Working class families, even up to middle class families. One less residential. That means one less family. You have Franklin School, Santa Barbara Junior High, Santa Barbara High School, a lot of shopping, restaurants. Why deny a family that wants to live on Jennings? Why deny them? That's just going to be one less family that's not going to be able to over there. I do not approve this project whatsoever. I don't, or any others for that matter. So please take this into consideration and deny this because, like I just said, one less residential for a family. Where are they going to go? It's hard enough as it is. I remember when they were building the San Roque area. They were right where they were just building the homes. I remember the lemon groves out in Goleta. Throughout the years, population has grown, and it's getting more and more difficult for families to rent or buy a home. Here, population has grown. Santa Barbara is still small. Let's focus on the people who live here, who work here, who want to raise their families. Let's focus on them. Thank you.
Marco Farrell will be followed by Rafael Carrillo.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. I'm Marco Farrell, a realtor with Coldwell Banker since 2002. I come here today with my realtor hat on and to tell you a little bit about the property and the neighborhood. I represented the seller of 812 Jennings in 2016. It was on the market for 223 days. Of that, 78 days was with another agent before we took over the listing. The price was lowered 6 times, closing 13.2% lower than initially offered. We marketed the property in our office through all of our agents in our MLS on dozens and dozens of different real estate websites, portals, multiple print ads, as well as doing dozens of broker open houses and public open houses. The home was a challenge to sell because of the multiple use properties nearby. Being an M1 zone property and in a mixed residential, manufacturing, industrial neighborhood, there's a metal fabrication shop right across the street, an appliance repair shop down the street, and a wholesale tile and marble shop and warehouse behind it. All of these shops are a necessary part of our vibrant community and are worked and owned by many wonderful, hardworking people. Because of the neighborhood's commercial, manufacturing, and industrial mixed use, the house was on the market for a long time and did not sell. The people of Santa Barbara were not interested in buying this home to live in. The home was completely remodeled and finished before being put on the market. It was marketed to families in the Santa Barbara area and beyond, and despite being the lowest priced single-family home on the market at the time, we did not get the right offer until Max came along. Proper regulation is the right way to address the issue on short-term rentals. While I don't support every project, I do support this project and the appropriate use of this property and zoning. I do know several large families who live out of state and country who can only afford to visit friends and family when they can rent from a short-term rental, and they end up spending a lot of money in our local community, local businesses, and should not be shut out by a total ban.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rafael Carrillo will be followed by Pedro Lopez.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. I'm not a public speaker. I'm just a general contractor. And I am here today because as a general contractor, I've always felt that we are ambassadors for our city and our county. We have people that contract us to build for you, remodel, make our community more beautiful, make improvements. We make housing, we are the builders of the homes. And from day one in this project, when I started working for this gentleman, the first thing he wanted to do is do things right. And of course, I immediately introduced him to a few of the inspectors that work at the city. They came over to the property. They gave us direction. I saw this man follow all the rules. And I am concerned as an ambassador for the city, always encouraging my clients to follow rules. I keep up with the codes, everything. I have here a client that followed all the rules. And once he got to the end goal, he's like, well, we changed our mind. How can I go and advise other clients on what to do with their properties when rules are changed at the end of the game? It feels like, the city helped them weave a rope and now they're trying to hang them. I mean, I know those are extreme words, but this is an extreme situation. I see prejudice. I don't think that Mr. Tyne is exaggerating when he says that his constitutional one particular sector, 7C, I believe that there is prejudice here. Now, the future of the vacation rentals, I understand. You guys might shut the door on that. But in this case, he was invited from day one. He was told, yes, if you follow these rules, you can do this. And now he is being told otherwise. It's inconsistent. Thank you.
Pedro Lopez will be followed by Anna Marie Gott.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council. I'm here to speak as a resident and one who lives on Jennings Avenue, but also as the pastor of Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish. First of all, since this conversion took place, even before the permit was issued, a number of the people that came to rent the property were a nuisance. There's a tremendous increase in the noise factor late into the night. There were a few occasions when we were very close to calling the police in order to deal with it and to deal with some misbehavior other than that. But also there's another concern, and it's about the parking. Not only parking on site, but also parking along Jennings Avenue. And it restricts greatly the ability for two vehicles to pass each other when they're going in opposite directions. And so when you have an increased number of vehicles parked on the street, And also in people's driveways, it makes it impossible for one of those vehicles that are traveling in opposite directions to pull into a driveway or to somehow move away from the other vehicle that it's coming towards it so that they can pass each other. So this creates a safety issue. I'm not sure if you were aware of that or how great it was, but it is of great concern. This is something that we have to deal with on a regular basis because of parish services. When we have a large service, whether it's a wedding, a Sunday Mass, a funeral, parking is a very, very difficult matter when it goes beyond our parking lot capacity and it spills out onto the city streets. And so we are always looking to help people to manage their movement down the streets so as to not get into an accident. So it also affects this conversion, because the number of vehicles that are being brought on site or that are spilling out onto street parking or even parking on the lawn area when people rent this property adds to the safety issues.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question for you, though.
Yes.
Did I understand your comments correctly, that there have been multiple tenants inside this since it's been purchased last year, not
Yes.
just one continual tenant?
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yes. So
right.
whether that is while it was under permit or being considered for permit or not, there have been short-term residents that have been staying there.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll probably see you this weekend eating tamales.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Great.
Thank you.
Viva
very
la
much.
fiesta.
Yes, thank you. Anna Marie Gott, and is Doug Taylor here? No. Vasante Vithian, there you are. Thank you. Natasha Todorovic, you're right there, and Natalia Giovanni right there. Okay, so Anna Marie Gott, you have up to 8 minutes, and then Max Mironen, you'll be after that. So let me just get this going. There you go. Okay.
So I think you guys know that I do my homework and I dig into things. So I'd like you to understand that the ABR did not provide a development plan approval finding that was an approval for 718 Castillo. That project was under 1,000 square feet. And that project only needed design approval for something. There wasn't a damn thing that they could have done to stop the conversion because it was under 1,000 square feet. This project is over 1,000 square feet, and it does require the development plan approval findings, and I agree. We need a policy that actually looks at all conversions, because it's ridiculous for us to have a policy that allows for absolutely no approvals, no conditions for any of the single-family homes or apartments or half a duplex or whatever you want to, throw at it that's under 1,000 square feet that comes to the ABR, the show, or over-the-counter permits like 1805 that has that illegal short-term vacation rental and the 2 hot tubs in the backyard. But let's get back to this project. This project, because it is over 1,000 square feet, requires a discretionary approval, and that is associated with the development plan approval finding B. Is the project consistent with the principles of sound community planning? Sound community planning, as directed by the City Attorney's Office in the DPA memo that was issued to the ABR and the HLC on March the 30th, very specifically said that they could look at concerns from residents that actually had to do with the loss of housing, impacts with traffic and parking deficits, the lack of accessibility. They could also look at noise, any of those things, as well as anything that they found in the general plan, or the idea that actually our policy possibly at the city might actually be counter to sound community planning. And that is what we've got right now with the exceptions. The exceptions under the condominium and hotel conversion ordinance, or the counter to sound community planning when you have people that come from out of Santa Barbara that buy properties solely to convert to short-term vacation rentals. Did you receive that document that was sent around? It has a little highlight on it, and it says, Joe Armel. Isn't that the gentleman that is here today? He received a permit for a unit under 1,000 square feet in March. He didn't have to any development plan approval findings. But as an investor, and I keep telling you this, speculative investors will come to Santa Barbara, purchase property with the sole intention of removing housing from our housing stock to actually only allow short-term vacation rentals or tourists, basically, to live in the homes. So that is displacing our residents. And it's not just this property. The gentleman at 414 Ruth Avenue, the owner of that property, David Sullins, just got a short-term vacation rental approval on Haley Street. He owns multiple properties in Santa Barbara, and I'm sure there's one on Victoria that's probably going to, get in line next. We also have Edward St. George, large property owner. He just got one. So if you really want to try to preserve our housing for our residents, a starter home for people that may not be able to afford a $2 million home, these small units that are under 1,000 square feet are ideal for them. But they're also ideal for investors right now. It's a giant loophole, just like the 250 units for the AUD. We were, 1,382 the last time I looked? And they keep coming, and we can't shut them off? Well, that's what we've got right now with the short-term vacation rentals. So getting back to this issue with this particular project, Father Pedro also talked about, parking. There's only one side of the street that you can park on Jennings. So that limits the amount of parking. And you guys have heard that, reunions, wedding parties, bachelorette parties, bachelor parties, Gaucho alumni parties, like to actually use short-term vacation rentals. They don't have to follow any rules of hotels. And they bring a lot of people and a lot of parking. I have personally witnessed more than 4 vehicles actually for that one house at 812 Jennings. They were lined up down the driveway, and people were still coming from the neighborhood. Because when you have something like a bachelorette party, usually not everybody lives in the same place. They come in from different areas, and they all drive their own cars. The same thing happens with reunions and all sorts of other types of get-togethers. Yeah, sometimes families come in one car, but that really doesn't necessarily happen when it's a party house. And you heard from Bill Corbin last week that the house next to him on Mitchell-Turena, it's like a convention center every week with wedding parties and big reunions and frat parties, coming in from all over, renting out 2 houses and taking up all the parking there and on the streets. So the parking requirements for a hotel might be great for a bed, a bathroom, and maybe a sitting room, but they're completely not appropriate for a house. You will also hear probably that, people, would like to maybe park on the front lawn. That's happened. And, Max, I don't know exactly who Max is. I think his mom might be married or shacked up with the owner. But, that's just from the Google listings I've found and after talking to the people up in San Francisco. Because in San Francisco, Joe owns another home that he purchased, and there was an enforcement case against him as a short-term vacation rental. So this is a habit of some people purchasing homes in multiple cities just to take, a gamble that they're going to be able to double and triple the rent so they can focus on short-term vacation rentals versus actual residents. And when they do that, they remove the housing from our housing supply. We do need, a policy hearing, but this is about the discretionary finding, which was made appropriately.
Thank you. Max Mironov, and then Joe Rushan will be the final speaker.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and City Council members. I'm Max Mironov. 1 year ago, we purchased Jennings Avenue with the intention of converting it to a short-term rental. Before we purchased Jennings Avenue, I hired a really great local architect and who I've known from working in Santa Barbara for many years. And we did all the preliminary research and I spent countless hours over the past 9 months at the planning counter reviewing all the requirements and making sure that we met all the requirements. And we followed everything that I was told to follow. And then it was a shock to us that ABR denied our conversion. So I just wanted to say that the way the system is in place, I've heard from both different sides that it needs to be refined, and I would agree with that. One thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the parking. When I submitted this proposal to staff, we actually submitted 3 parking proposals, one of which you haven't seen here today. And it involves demoing the one-car accessory structure or garage that's actually too small to be a parking space, which is the only reason we're not using it as a parking space, and adding a parking lot in the back of the house. This proposal would add enough parking to where it would just solve all the parking issues that all the neighbors have concerns about. And it's much more than is required from staff. It's much more than is the bare minimum, but it's something that I proposed and I'm willing to do. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are you living at the house now? Who's at the house now?
No one is at the house, ma'am. We use it as a short-term rental, and then we got a letter from the city to stop, so now it's vacant.
Okay, so you were using it. So you bought it. You were using it as short-term rental. You got an enforcement case. You stopped using it as a short-term rental, and now it's vacant. Is that accurate?
After we got the enforcement case, we were told by city staff that we would get the short-term rental permit within 2 weeks. So we actually got a 2-week extension to keep using it as a vacation rental while we finalize our permit. And then it came to a great shock for us when we didn't get that permit. So then we didn't get another extension and stopped using it.
Okay, so that's since April then? Is that when you mean when the ABR? I'm just trying to get the timeline right. So when ABR denied the
Correct.
the appeal, that's when the ABR action occurred in April. So that was your 2-week extension. And so it's been vacant since April.
That's correct.
Okay, and where was I going? I had something else. I can't think of it. Okay, thank you. Ms. Murillo had a question. Maybe I'll think of that.
Thank you,
while
Madam
you're
Mayor.
talking.
So, Mr. Mironov, the first thing I want to say is I don't appreciate comments about people shacking up with other people. That's inappropriate in these proceedings.
Thank you.
But I do want to ask you, why won't you rent it as a long-term rental?
Well, it's, as the realtor that was selling the property asked or stated, this home was for sale for a long time on the market, and the price it was listed for almost a year, and the price just kept lower and lower and lower. And even when it was the cheapest home on the market, the price kept dropping. And from my perspective, the single-family families in Santa Barbara had a lot of opportunities to live in this home, and nobody desired to do so because of the fact that the neighborhood is so industrious. There's a tile shop that cuts tile behind this home, and across the street there's a metal fabrication shop that does ironwork. And it's a really nice home. They remodeled it, and the sellers did everything they could to sell it to a family, and it just didn't happen.
Okay. Did you try to rent it out as a long-term rental?
We did, yes, ma'am. And we've been trying ever since we got denied, and it's just not, people just don't want to live there. So we might convert it to something else if we can, to another commercial use, but it's just really not working as a single-family home.
Thank you.
So, for all the reasons why what you're saying is no one wants to stay there as a long-term tenant, why then would someone want to go there on a vacation?
Well, I feel that when I go on a vacation with my family, it's more about the time spent together versus really the community of the neighborhood. So if I was there with my younger brothers and sisters and my relatives, we could enjoy dinner and we could, play board games in the home and have a wonderful time.
So location of where you're staying doesn't matter when you go on vacation? I mean, in terms of, as you're going to market this as a short-term rental?
Well, actually, the location is convenient. It's 0.9 miles from the beach and it's 0.9 miles from downtown, and the accessory structure currently is full of bicycles, and it's really nice for families to be able to get around Santa Barbara.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Dominguez had a question for you.
So you mentioned you tried to rent it to a long-term renter.
Yes,
Did
sir.
you list it on the MLS, or how did you go about trying to rent it?
Craigslist, sir.
And what was the rent you were asking?
$3,000.
And no one would come rent it for $3,000?
No, I had a few emails. I showed it to a few people, and we just couldn't find the tenants. The people, I had 8 college kids email me, and I considered that, but I feel like that wouldn't be much better than the vacation rental.
I think you're right about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for answering all those questions.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe Rushan, you're the final speaker.
Hi, I want to make sure I have this straight. As of October 1st, when the new zoning ordinance goes into effect, the M1 zone will not permit hotel uses. Is that correct?
You can just keep speaking and we'll ask after public comments over.
Because if so, then this unit will be non-conforming. I mean, if the project was approved, the zone would be purified of this non-conforming use, but only for 2 months. After that, we go back to it being a non-conforming use again. Isn't that right? Is anybody?
We'll ask the question after public comment.
Oh,
like I said.
okay.
So whatever else you got,
The other
23 seconds left.
The other thing was the business about this being only one unit and the RENA numbers. That's all very nice. But we have a housing shortage, and eliminating a unit of housing is counterproductive. I don't know, is it any more complicated than that? Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes public comment. You have another minute 50 if you'd like any at this point. Let me just put that on the... There you go. Oops, not 15 minutes. Definitely not 15 minutes. Okay, there you go. All right.
For Bath Street, with over 1,000 square feet from residential use to a short-term rental use, was consistent with sound community planning. So the city, if they did change their opinion on April 24th, has gone back now on June 7th and said that the conversion of a single-family residence in a approved zone for short-term rental is consistent with sound community planning. I don't think we can illustrate more clearly the inequities of the disparate treatment. I again reiterate that this is not about short-term rentals. This is about converting this one property from its current use to an approved commercial use within an approved zone when it meets all of the guidelines. It impacts only this property, and the fact that in the future it may become non-conforming again is not something that we can render a decision on. We have to deal with the law as it currently is written. We have to deal with the law as it was written during this appeal. And so I ask you to consider that. There's only one individual you have heard from in this room today who will suffer a direct financial impact based on your decision, which has a serious consequence, and that's Mr. Armel. your decision will, in fact, affect him dramatically, and he did everything right. He followed all the rules. He communicated the whole time with the city, and at the last second, the rug got pulled out from under him and the rules changed. And I ask that we don't inspire people to avoid the rules for fear of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question, Madam Mayor?
Go ahead.
Mr. Tyne, so I'm sorry, you're now talking about 1624 Bath Street?
Right.
And was that less than 1,000 feet or
No,
greater?
it was greater than 1,000 square feet. It was decided by a staff hearing officer who made a specific finding that it was consistent with sound community planning, and they allowed the conversion on June 7th, 2017.
Thanks.
Mr. Hart?
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I have some comments. And
Okay. So I'll get to you just a sec. Thank you. So you're done with Mr. Tyne, right? Did you have a question for Mr. Tyne?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tyne.
Thank you.
So it's to the council. Go ahead, Mr. Hart.
Yes, I agree with Mr. Tyne that this is not a discussion about vacation rentals, that this is a site-specific permit application that has specific findings that are necessary to make for this specific project in this neighborhood. And I can't make the findings D that the proposed development is consistent with the city's traffic management strategy, specifically in regard to the parking on this site. I don't think that tandem parking is appropriate for this location. I don't think it works on Jennings Avenue. I don't think it works for this use. I don't think it's a good design, and I think simply that issue enough, since this is a de novo hearing and we have to make all the findings to approve this project, I can't make that finding and can't approve the project.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Brooke, could you answer the question about the new zoning ordinance that was brought up about hotels?
Certainly, Madam Mayor, that is correct. With Council's adoption of the new zoning ordinance, when it goes into effect on October 1st, hotels will not be an allowed use in the M1 zone. So it would be, if this were to be approved, it would become a non-conforming use on October 1st.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Rouse.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions. Brooke, so if this were a conversion from its current use to an office space, construction office or whatever, would we be having this hearing necessarily? I mean, it would be to a commercial use, certainly not to an STR, but in your opinion, would we be here right now?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Rouse, it would have the same application requirements, so it would have had, that scenario would require a development plan. It would require the same 4 findings to be made by the ABR. I can't speculate as to whether or not ABR would be able to make those findings with a different project proposal. That's one of the factors that they have to consider in their independent judgment.
Well, I guess my next question, I don't know exactly how this happens, or maybe for Mr. Colon, but in terms of, where we're going with this and how we're making our findings and the determining boards, ABR and HLC in this case, over and above the show and or planning commission, I seem to recall that we appointed these boards to review exterior appearances, construction, zoning, not zoning, but not land use issues. My question is this. I mean, this may be overly broad, but I mean, the finding of sound community planning, are we going to hit the banana peel every time on this? Is this a defensible finding in terms of I mean, I realize this is, as Mr. Hart said, de novo, and this is a quasi-judicial thing, but I'm not an attorney. I get to play one on Tuesdays, but I'm not an attorney. Where are we with this? Because this seems like we're going to go over this again and again and again, absent some kind of change or some kind of clarification. Is this a finding that we can make consistently and defend from your standpoint?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Rouse, I have the wonderful opportunity to give my client advice in public on thorny issues, so I need to be circumspect. I'll say this. The record here shows that the staff was in support of the application. The I would be concerned about a conclusion that any new conversion of an existing residential use is in violation of the growth management ordinance. I think that kind of blanket finding calls into question whether the city is respecting other provisions of the zoning ordinance, such as the M1 that would allow the hotel use that's being sought here. So that's really in response to the ABR. The good news here is that the City Council is conducting a de novo hearing, so you're not limited to refereeing or playing on the same field that the ABR played on. As Councilmember Hart mentioned, you do have to make, and the staff mentioned, you do have to make the 4 findings that are laid out in the ordinance, including the consistency with sound community planning. So what does sound community planning mean? Certainly the staff analysis says it means consistency with the general plan. I think, as Ms. Gott mentioned, that a range of impacts related to the specific use could be considered as sound community planning. In other words, while Lady Justice is blind, she's not stupid. So that this is a vacation rental use isn't something you have to ignore. I disagree strongly with Mr. Tyne about the constitutional issue here. Discrimination, if you will, among land uses is precisely what the police power allows, and I think that's consistent with the Constitution. So in sum, you have a pretty bad playing field coming to you from the ABR, and I think part of your deliberation has to be to remake it into another framework for considering the 4 required findings.
That's my questions for right now. Reserve comment for later.
Mr. Dominguez?
So I have a question for staff on the last slide you showed with the numbers for the RHNA and the what's currently being permitted. And I was trying to make sense of on our AUD list, you have, there's 243 affordable units. So I'm guessing the AUD affordable covers different categories than very low, low, moderate, and above average, above moderate. So do you have a definition, or can you explain why we have 2 different numbers?
I'm just pulling those numbers up myself. So what's shown on the slide is units that have received a building permit. So the AUD affordable units, we have 98 units that have received a building permit to date. That could have been any time between 2013 and today. But it does show here on this slide that those 98 units were issued a building permit in 2016. And it would be in the same income categories. It would be very low and low that would qualify, or moderate if we had any, but we don't, under the AUD program, that would fall under these AUD statistics.
So like the Hope Avenue Housing Authority project, is that part of the 98?
I don't believe so, because I don't believe they have a building permit.
They don't have a permit yet?
That's comprised of other projects.
And those would be the
Grace Village units under construction right now on Upper State Street, and maybe a couple smaller projects that make up that 98.
So the 3869 State Street, that's 58 units.
The
that
other
might be part of it.
The one on Haley Street, the people self-help housing.
510 Celsi Puedes. Okay. And the State Street and the State Street 3869, is that a senior housing?
Correct.
And the Celsi Puedes, do you know what the restrictions are there?
I don't know the income restrictions. It's people self-help that operates and will manage that.
Okay. And then the one that I mentioned on Hope, that one's going to be seniors?
I believe so. Yes, senior housing.
And then the one next to the Mark, the Lutheran Church?
That's the one.
That's the Grace. Okay.
Right.
So my concern is the type of housing we're building and who it's going to end up with. If a lot of these 98 units, and it looks like it's going to grow to 240 if these projects get built, but a big chunk of them are earmarked for seniors, which is great. I want to build more senior housing, but if we're not building low and very low income housing, and we're not building moderate housing for our middle class workers. We had some great public comments from a restaurant person, from someone who has a cleaning service. Where are the workers going to live who are working for you? We're not building it, and what we're doing now is we're taking units off. With the AUD, we've actually incentivized the loss of workforce units because the AUD encourages new development, which is good, but they're taking out older homes which are below market. So we have a double whammy, plus all the above moderate, the new for market rents are creating a demand. For every 100 units, it adds a demand for about 15 units of workforce housing that's not being met. In fact, we're losing it. So I think that plays into my determination of sound community planning. Mr. Tyne raised a good argument with the privileges and immunities clause. But it sounds like Mr. Kalan is confident that we're in compliance with that. And I had a question: why did the Bath property not end up at ABR, and it went to a staff hearing officer?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Dominguez, that one did have some design review aspect as part of it. They were making some exterior changes, but the development plan was not before the ABR for consideration. It went to the staff hearing officer because there was also a setback modification, I believe, as part of that application. So the development plan went to the staff hearing officer as well, so the ABR scope of review was just the exterior changes.
On Bath Street?
At 1624 Bath. Yes.
Okay. So, thank you. For me, the question really becomes, where do you draw the line? It's just one unit, but we're short, depending on what numbers you're looking at, 1,500 units for workforce housing, probably more. I think Jennings Street's an amazing street. I have friends and neighbors who live on that street and people who work on that street. I've talked to the business owners. I've talked to residents about the street, not in the context of this, because this is kind of a newer issue, at least to me here on council. It's a beautiful street. People who live there really love living there. To the extent part of the problem is the nuisance behavior, to me, that really doesn't make up my mind, because I think the applicant and their business model would encourage them to screen who's staying there more heavily. And I think most cities in California are moving to models where there are regulations on short-term rentals, and if they do have nuisance tenants, they can lose their license. So hopefully we'll push to a model like that so we don't have bad players from out of town causing problem for neighbors. I think this is also distinguishable because of the parking, and I'm glad he mentioned that he had offered to add more parking, because the way it's structured now with this tandem parking spot, that's a real problem for that community because parking is really impacted. And finally, the correspondence we've received from people on this issue have generally been in favor of the ABR's decision based on the housing shortage and things like parking. And really, we received a lot of emails who were in favor of denying or upholding the appeal in favor of the project, but they were mostly out-of-town entities. So in this case, it's a matter of doing what's right for the people on that street and in the city. And in this case, I think it's upholding the ABR's decision. And I would make the finding that it violates sound community planning because of the housing crisis we're in. And the fact that, in particular, what's distinctive between this project and other projects is the fact it is in this M1 zone where if this were to go through, we'd never be able to return it to residential use.
Mr. Hotchkiss.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't really know how the whole housing picture that you just brought up, Mr. Dominguez, has anything to do with what we're talking about here. These folks played by the rules, and they followed them, and that ought to be honored. There are property rights when we set it up so that somebody can fulfill whatever they want with their property, then we should not change those at the last minute. It's just not the way you play the game. So you either change the rules in the beginning or you let it go forward, and we ought to let this go forward. So I think that the applicant should prevail, and we should overturn the ABR decision. ABR also, I think, almost sets a policy in the way they have found that is the purview not of the ABR but of the City Council. And we have made it real clear that if you live in the right district, in the right area, and the right zone, you can pursue various projects, including short-term rental.
Ms. Murillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do think we need to have a bigger policy discussion about housing, protecting the housing stock in general, particularly our rental housing stock. And Mr. Tyne, that was one of the best presentations I've ever seen in this room, and I really appreciate your articulate arguments. And I am persuaded by Mr. Lopez, or are you Father Lopez? Okay, now I'm in trouble. I didn't know you were the Father Lopez over there, representing that street, because I know you keep a good eye on everything, and your concerns about parking speak to me, and that is an argument that we can make, a finding that we can make that is safe legally, and at the same time keeping in mind that we need to have a bigger discussion about protecting our housing. A lot of statements were made today about our average unit size density program, kind of related in the bigger picture. The high priority overlay projects, 80% of them are in the commercial zone, so they are not all taking out affordable housing. And so I just wanted to make that clear. There's a drumbeat here against our AUD, and I just wanted to say it's so complicated and it's so layered that we really need to deal in facts when we're talking about it. The need for housing that's going to be created by moderately priced housing, that's part of a study that we're undertaking right now at the Housing Task Force related to making changes to the AUD program, which does need some changing. So Madam Mayor, I will deny the appeal, please.
Okay. Mr. Rouse?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In these specific hearings, like the one we had just before this one and this one now today on the same subject, we're talking about things like arena numbers and housing issues and whatnot. When we're talking about one case, one ad hoc case, and not only that, but a house within the M1, where we zone for and allow commercial conversion. It's now a residence, which is non-conforming. It's going to be converted to a commercial property, which is conforming. And whether or not it goes forward into the next NZO and be non-conforming with a hotel is immaterial at this point in time. Mr. Tyne's exactly right about that. We've got to deal with the rules the way they were set out when we went in. We have talked about this very controversial STR VRBO thing for a couple years now. And part of the conversation has been that we do not have a ban on STRs. They're not allowed in certain zones, but they are allowed as a hotel conversion use in others. But what some of my colleagues seem to be talking about now is a de facto ban. And I find that not only disturbing, but I'm going back to the banana peel theory I mentioned earlier with Mr. Kalan. What are we setting ourselves up for here? If we want to change the rules, as Ms. Murillo said, let's have the bigger conversation. Let's do that. Let's go back to ordinance. It's going to be a long slog and get it right and be honest about what we're doing. But right now, I think we're being very inconsistent. It's hard for me to sit up here as part of a board that says, here's what you can do, here's the rules, go get them, you did them, great. I don't think so. And I think it's rather arbitrary. I think it's like I said, principles of sound community planning. I'm sure we can define that, but I can define it in a very broad sense. I think it's hard to nail down. And I am a little concerned that each one of these cases comes up, takes us into a broader community discussion, when in fact they're a single case about a single address and a single property. And I think that it's a slippery slope. I think that we're going to be making policy up every day that you come before this board, as opposed to what we know to be the code and the law. And I think it's unfair, actually, to our design review boards to put them in this position. I think it's going to be really unfair to council and everybody has to sit through these, to have these appeals come over and over and over again, which I'm sure we're setting ourselves up for here. So I am going to be upholding the appeal because, like I said, we have basically said you can convert this property to commercial use. One of the definitions of a commercial use is a hotel. Now, I don't have a feeling either way about STRs, agnostic, weather-wise, but I do know that the rules currently say this is allowable. Yes, we do have the discretion to change it up here right now today, to change for this particular case. But in the terms of fairness, as Mr. Hotchkiss said, we had some rules, we set them out, you followed them, and now we're saying, yeah, we don't think so, we're not in the mood today. And I just think that's a very inconsistent way to do policy. It's a very inconsistent way to promote sound planning and for people to follow the rules we set out in the future. So I will be upholding the appeal.
Mr. White.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will not be supporting the appeal, and I think that the comments that Mr. Rouse and Hotchkiss made really are helpful in really pushing us to have that policy discussion. I hate to end up in these situations where there's a sense of betrayal or a sense of not. There can be a difference of opinion, but when the banana peel is involved, I think it is important that we try and get to the heart of the discussion and make sure we're at least understanding where we disagree on a bigger picture. And I feel very badly about that. I think it's and I think the points about so that the policy discussion about STR, if we need to take it all on, and the under 1,000 square foot piece is I think is very troublesome as one component here. I also agree that this particular project is unique. It's a non-conforming use that's going to a conforming use that's going to become a non-conforming use in 2 months. Our other area, if there are two uses in this city that are under fire, it's regular residential use and it's M1 use. Those two, both of those are struggling. And so we're in this little, and Jennings provides these little miniature sort of Geppetto workplaces there, which are little residences that have been converted to these uses. The art restoration facility there, the tile cutting. So it is a struggle. I wanted to comment also on the point about ABR making findings of sound community planning. I've been making noises about that for years as we've developed the AUD, where I've been lobbying to get more stuff taken to Planning Commission because that's where there's less discomfort and more experience in coping with that difficult, thorny situation. And I know that now more of the AUD projects head in that direction as a result. And so that's it's a tough one and the comments that were made about was at Bath Street, where the staff hearing officer made the findings on the bigger planning findings, and the ABR ended up doing what we expect of ABR, which is how does it look, and is it in scale, etc. And that's what we appoint architects and landscape architects and design people to those boards because that's their focus. And so, let's see. I wanted to see if there was something else here. I appreciate Mr. Hart's comments about parking. I think that's an additional concern there, although the applicant has said, well, there's another way that I could come up with a larger parking problem. So to say, well, the parking is bad, but we're not going to allow you to do the other parking scene, I feel a little less comfortable about that. I'm certainly appreciative that that's another piece of this proposal that doesn't work quite right. And I appreciate Father Lopez's comments about how that's already, and perhaps the applicant was not following the rules the whole time if short-term rental was going on there without permits at some point. So, again, I will not be supporting the appeal. The housing emergency here is very real. I'm hearing from our attorney that the arguments made about the unconstitutionality of that decision is we're going to be able to defend. And I don't think we're going to see a lot of these. It's, as the applicant said, it's an expensive, time-consuming, painful process to get here. And when other entrepreneurs see that this is how it's going, then that there will be fewer following. Let's see, there was one other thing I wanted to say. Well, that's all for now. Thank you.
So on the bigger picture item, I know we need, we do need a bigger discussion. I don't know about the timing of how that should work because it's going to take a while, and the room will be big, and filled with comments, which is fine. I do think so just as a reminder, the staff hearing officer, there is an avenue for appealing to the Planning Commission and then up to here. So it's not like if the staff hearing officer approves or denies something, it's done. There is a process to get back to council, but yet it's dealing with the planning track as opposed to the design review track. So that makes sense, and in terms of the bigger picture. Also in terms of some of the comments made about the value of vacation rentals in general, I'll say it again, I'm a proponent of home sharing, which is currently not an option. That would add to those options for having vacation rentals for someone in their primary residence, but that is currently not an option today. So in part of this particular appeal as a de novo hearing, a couple things. I understand that while today this may be going from non-conforming to conforming, in 60 days it'd be non-conforming to non-conforming. We wouldn't even be here at this point. I think that means something. We just went through a whole process of making findings to create the NZO, and that was part of that process. I think I can't ignore that. I know this area, especially during this time of year, but I've been around. I've known people and some businesses in the area as well. And no matter what time of year it is, I think parking is an issue here. And I do have a concern with. I think it's finding D. So I think that is also a problem for this particular. What do I want to say? The recycling of tenancy here and how many cars will go there in terms of having a house where many people can come and creating other parking projects. So on this particular project, I'll be denying the appeal. So Mr. Dominguez, did you have something in the Mr. Hart? Mr. Ariel, Mr. Kalan?
Madam Mayor, I don't mean to interrupt the deliberation. If there's more among your colleagues, I'm happy to wait. I do want to talk about the findings, though, before you make a motion.
Sure. I have two lights on, Mr. Hart and Mr. Dominguez, and now Mr. White. So
I was prepared to make a motion, so if Mr. Kalan wants to speak to the motion before I make it,
Did you have a question first, Mr. White?
No, I wanted one last comment, which again, as we are discussing, this is the second discussion we've had in a short period of time, and that is there is a list of discretionary of land uses that people are allowed to apply for throughout our city, which there are cartoon instances where it's unacceptable, where you can apply for a church on the top of the mountaintops, or just things like that, where, yes, you can apply for a conditional use permit to do something, which would be laughable, because it just would never happen. And so and this is right there at the cutting edge of what's okay and what's not okay. And I completely appreciate, again, I really am I'm hearing Mr. Hotchkiss and Mr. Rouse making comments about going through the process and not getting blindsided, and I have a bad feeling about that. But there are instances where people can apply for completely unacceptable things and spend lots of money and jump through a lot of hoops and then end up at no. And we are in an inflection point on this issue, and as I say, I expect that the number of applicants will drop such if the council holds intermediate term on not approving the short-term rentals where there is discretion to do so.
Okay. Mr. Klug?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. The council's deliberative process is really helpful in that you frame the reasons for your thinking. When the motion comes and we are told to bring back written findings supporting your decision, it's helpful to refine that deliberative process into some more focused findings, because there are issues here, some of which were raised by Mr. Tyne, which are legitimate, which the staff and I have already spoken to you about either in the report or orally this afternoon. So that being said, I've understood the concern to be around parking, and parking as a concern is great, but it would be helpful to be more specific. So for example, parking really falls under finding B, the sound community planning rather than traffic management. The traffic management issue is very distinct. And the concern I heard Councilmember Dominguez express was around the feasibility of tandem parking on a hotel kind of use. That the staff have concluded that's acceptable doesn't really create an evidentiary burden that you have to overcome. You can disagree with that conclusion. So if your concern is principally around parking, I'd suggest that the motion focus on finding B and on the nature of the tandem parking. In addition, if there are concerns around the neighborhood nuisance issues that Father Lopez or others have expressed, those would be useful as well. So that's the guidance I would offer as you articulate the reasons to support whatever motion you're going to make, that we will put in writing and bring back to you for confirmation down the road.
Okay. Mr. Hart?
Madam Mayor, I'm sorry. Did you say parking is under B? B as in boy?
I did.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Mr. Hart?
I would make a motion to deny the appeal and direct staff to come back to council with the decision and findings resolution reflecting that judgment. And as I mentioned previously, my concerns have to do with the tandem parking plan that's proposed. I don't think that will work in practice on this street in this particular neighborhood. We've had testimony from folks who talked about the limited parking that's available on Jennings, the fact that there's only parking available on one side of the street, taking the tandem parking arrangement and having to shuffle cars on a regular basis for multiple people who are using this property. Is extremely disruptive. If there's no place to park the car on the street, they're going to be double parked while doing that maneuver, putting other people who are driving down the street on a narrow road in jeopardy and in danger. It's a safety issue. Additionally, there have been considerations about the nuisances involved with the use of this property on this particular instance, the impacts to the neighborhood. So I would hope that this is enough direction for council to prepare the findings and bring it back to us.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Hart.
It was
second
awfully
by
long.
Murillo. Mr. Dominguez and then Mr. White.
I just wanted to reiterate the housing question, and Ms. Murillo had a question about how many units we're losing to demolition. We're actually losing 55 units on 29 different properties within the city to demolition. So the problem is those particular households now are some of our lowest income workers. And when they lose an housing opportunity, there's really nowhere in town they can go. They're really, you may as well drive them to the town border because there's nowhere they're going to find. I'm heartened because if this property is available for $3,000, this may be a property that one of these 55 units of people who are getting evicted from their households is eligible for.
I knew your litigator spirit would have to respond to me, so
it's basic math.
Yeah, well, we're gaining units too with our average unit size density program, and I'm so glad to hear from my colleagues today that they're concerned about the housing shortage and that we're looking for solutions here in the city of Santa Barbara.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the parking question, we have a nonconformity on the property already. That is just and the project, the proposal gets credit for a space that it doesn't have. It's non-conforming as to one space at this point. The proposal aggravates that non-conformity. If you have a one-car deficit in the residential area, it's a worse problem having it with the going into a short-term rental. It's busier, more folks coming through. So that's another piece, at least, of the parking. I share the view that the problem is greater than that on this project, but I wanted to at least put that comment in there about it, and it may be worth considering to the motion maker as a part of the whole discussion of the parking question.
Mr. Hart, do you want to add that comment in there?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Murillo?
Yes.
Okay. All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, it's 5-2 with Rouse and Hotchkiss opposed. Thank you very much for all being here. We do have a couple of other items to deal with, so if you can take your conversations outside the room, I'd appreciate it. You're welcome to stay as well. We move on to council committee assignment reports. Ms. Murillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to start out by thanking you, Mayor Schneider, for moderating our high cost of living in Santa Barbara forum that we had last week. It was put on by the city's Living Wage Committee, and it was a focus on jobs and housing. And one of the great momentum that we felt going forward was there's a lot of interest in bringing housing to State Street and mixed-use development specifically onto State Street, which it's zoned for. And our pro-youth movement, that's one of my community projects. We sponsored a self-defense training for girls and women on Sunday through the Rape Crisis Center, and it was very empowering. We had 3 13-year-olds and 2 14-year-old girls, and a lot of women in their 50s like myself. So it was wonderful to have the mix of ages, and wonderful. Every woman should take self-defense training. The Affordable Housing Task Force, that's a South Coast focus group. We met last week, and Jennifer McGovern gave us a presentation on her Housing Trust Fund's new home loan program. So as painful as it is to buy something in Santa Barbara, there's a little bit of hope through the Housing Trust Fund loan program. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Hart?
Last week, the Landlord-Tenant Task Force met for the first time, and there's a lot of there was a lot of spirited discussion at the meeting, and Mr. Justice will have his hands full working his magic and delivering a consensus result from that project, but I remain confident in his ability to get people to work together.
Mr. Dominguez?
I was going to make the same remark as Councilmember Hart, so forego on it now.
Mr. White?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended the CCWA monthly meeting last week, And the one piece I would commend to my colleagues is the CCWA forwarded a really interesting, informative paper on the California water fix, and it gets our head around just the whole twin tunnel project and how that's moving forward. And the environmental work is still has been. I guess the draft environmental document is out, and the document is finalized, and then they're saying, well, there'll be about 10 years of litigation on the environmental document. Is what they're sort of just building and baking into the project as part of what will go forward. But
I'd like to thank the staff involved in working with the Music Academy of the West and City College on what was a magnificent concert last night at Del Playa Stadium. I think there were about 8,000 people there, filled the whole area, and perfect night. And it was a beautiful performance, and Santa Barbara stepped up, so it was a really lovely event. And so, but I know it took a lot of work from our waterfront department, Public Works, and Park and police in particular. So I want to acknowledge them for that. All right, we have some closed sessions to read. Item 15, conference with city attorney, anticipated litigation as described in agenda item 15. And item 16, conference with city attorney, anticipated litigation as described in agenda item 16. Okay.
Madam Mayor, I want to apologize. I had attempted to communicate that we would not be doing the item 15 closed session today due to the, frankly, a noticing error. So it's only item 16 that we've got.
Okay, so we'll move 15 to another date. We'll have number 16 in closed session, and we will adjourn from closed session. See you next week.
When I think of Tom, I think about the night when the earth smelled of summer and the sky was streaked with white and the soft mist of England was sleeping on a hill. I remember this, and I always will. There are new lovers now in the same silent hill, looking on the same blue sea. And I know Tom and I are a part of them all, and they're all a part of Tom and me. Hello, young lovers, wherever you are. I hope your troubles are few. All my good wishes go with you tonight. I've been in love like you. Be brave, young lovers, and follow your star. Be brave and faithful and true. Cling very close to each other tonight. I've been in love like you. I know how it feels to have wings on your heels and to fly down the street in a trance. You fly down the street with the chance that you'll meet, and you meet not really by chance. Don't cry, young lovers, whatever you do. Don't cry because I'm alone. memories are happy tonight. I've had a love of my own. Yes, I've had a love of my own like yours. I've had a love of my own. I know how it feels to have wings on your heels and to fly down the street in a trance. You'll fly down the street with the chance that you'll meet, and you meet not really by chance.